Okay, is this all making sense? Yeah? Complicated? It is, and I'm going to make it even a little more complicated. We're going to talk a bit about the city science process that we go through. And pretty much everything that you heard today starts with data analytics, insight. Like, how can we understand what current conditions are? This shows a project we did in Andorra with using telecom data to understand the human dynamics. Case of Kendall Square, what are the emissions? Then we identify all those interventions that can improve on that condition. I mean, this can be nuclear batteries, housing policy, mobility, hydroponics, etc. But good ideas are not enough. We need to understand what the impact is. So we move to prediction, build simulation models to try to predict what the social or the environmental or the economic impact of a particular intervention would be. I mean, assigning these numbers is an example of how we do that. But there are two more really critical steps of the process if you want to have impact in cities. You have to build consensus. You can have great ideas, you could prove that they would work, but unless you bring people together and help them create a shared vision of the future, very little happens. This is a social dynamic issue. And there's still another piece which is really critical. So even if you have great ideas and you bring the community along, what are the processes by which you can actually realize that transformation? And we're looking at new governance models, particularly how to harness market forces with creative public policy. So let me talk just for a minute about these last two. So this creates kind of the integrated city science process. But consensus, this gets overlooked a lot. Consensus, so we build, and you can see them downstairs. We'll be inviting you downstairs during lunch. What we think of as consensus machines, Cityscope. This shows the components of the Cityscope. We use projection onto optically tagged Lego bricks. We have a tangible interface. People can move them around and see the impact. We have the radar plot and other ways of understanding the impact of whatever change we're looking at. You can see the three-dimensional massing. We have an agent-based simulation. We think of this as augmented reality, augmented intelligence. So it's a new form of AI, using what humans do best combined with what machines do best. Or sometimes I prefer the term extended intelligence. You're actually using these tools to extend the intelligence of humans. So this is the Cityscope platform that we use to model Kendall Square. It's really interesting because these tools allow diverse groups of stakeholders to come and meet and to explore scenarios. It's the opposite of an open mic community engagement process where the loudest, angriest voices dominate. This allows people to engage in a more creative way. And I'll just briefly show one of my favorite examples. In Hamburg, working with then Mayor Olaf Scholz, we started a project there to help them design the community that would house the 2024 Olympics so that it would be a high-performance community after the event. The mayor lost the referendum. They had an influx they were expecting 80,000 refugees from the war in Syria, so the mayor came to us and said, the old project's dead, help us identify sites to build housing for the refugees. So we shifted, we built a project that used our little optically tagged Lego bricks. We held community sessions with groups of people from each district. The mayor said every district, rich and poor, has to share equally. We're not creating ghettos, and the mayor's not deciding where to put the housing. The community has to decide. So people would come and explore possibilities. They would move these Lego pieces around, and that represented housing, and they would see access to schools and shopping and mass transit, how those accesses would be altered through different locations. Then they'd come back together. This was really interesting. In effect, they were competing, each district, to see who could accommodate the most refugees. I think this process could be used for controversial topics in our cities related to zoning or affordable housing, parking, issues like that. By the way, an article in the Atlantic magazine, Germany's radical pro-refugee urban planning experiment about this project. It was really not urban planning, it was really consensus building. We've built these types of projects all over the world in many different cities, used for different purposes. I think we're just beginning to explore the possibilities. We've been doing some consulting work outside of MIT to build this Shenzhen Urban Simulation Center, a similar one in Hangzhou. We're doing some work in the Middle East. It's actually pretty exciting. This is, for me, an even more exciting application of technology than some of the new systems that can be deployed in the city. I think this is really fundamental. And then governance. I do believe that restrictive zoning policy may be the greatest barrier to climate change solutions. Remember, when I started, I talked about the IPCC report about how new cities are designed and managed and powered will lock in behavior and lifestyles. Zoning, the way it's now conceived, and it's like 100 years old, it's totally obsolete, I think is a great barrier. We're beginning to look at alternatives to that. If you have, just simple example, if you have a 3-story building in the city, you could lock that down and say, you can always build this way, but there's a new opt-in system. We will give you incentives to build more square footage, but you have to take a percentage of that and apply it to pro-social purposes, which could be thought of as in 2 categories. One are the assets, and those are things like essential housing. I don't really like the affordable housing term. You need essential housing, housing for all the people, the workforce in a community, daycare, grocery, pharmacy, things that are lacking in a place like Kendall Square. You could also create an endowment where you're staking a local token economy, rent-own programs, new business programs, even direct payments for the people that are closest to the project to realize the greatest impact. This can all be dynamic, so you get a little too much of this asset, you dial back that incentive, you dial up others. It can be algorithmic, this continuous mapping of incentives to community benefits for pro-social purposes. And then we can deploy the things that we're all thinking about: public ledger, smart contracts, data analytics, simulation. We think of this as a way to realize some new form of ESG community metrics. We will be exploring these and other issues in this room in 2 weeks at our City Science Summit. We're going to go through some of the same topics we talked about today, but we'll also be presenting a new design for the city of Kyiv that we're developing with Norman Foster and his foundation. We'll be looking at how we can learn from this experience from Kendall Square and apply it to a new community in Kharkiv destroyed by the war with Russia. That's October 27th and 28th. Be in touch with us if you're interested. So thank you all for this session. I hope it was interesting.